When you hear the name King Solomon, what comes to mind? Probably wisdom, right? The story of the two mothers and the baby, the fabulously wealthy king of Israel, the builder of the magnificent first temple in Jerusalem. For centuries, he's been the poster boy for sagacity and just rule. But what if I told you there's another side to this legendary figure, a darker, more complex story that's often left out of the highlight reel? A story of a man whose unparalleled wisdom couldn't save him from his own human frailties. Today, we re-pulling back the curtain on the legend to uncover the shocking tale of how the wisest man in the world allegedly lost his mind. Let's set the stage. We're in the 10th century BCE. Solomon, son of King David, ascends to the throne of a united Israel. Early in his reign, God appears to him in a dream and offers him anything he wants. Solomon, in a move that would define his legacy, doesn't ask for riches or long life. He asks for an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. God is so pleased with this selfless request that he grants him not only unparalleled wisdom, but also the riches and honor he did and ask for. And for a while, everything was good, and literally. Solomon's reign was a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity. The Bible describes his wealth in staggering terms: fleets of ships bringing back gold from the land of Ophir, silver as common as stones in Jerusalem, and a magnificent palace that took 13 years to build. His magnum opus was the First Temple, an architectural marvel that became the center of Jewish worship for centuries. Leaders from all over the known world, like the famous Queen of Sheba, traveled to Jerusalem just to witness his wisdom and splendor firsthand. He was on top of the world, the undisputed master of his kingdom, a king blessed by God himself. He had it all. But here's where the story takes a turn. Even the wisest man isn't immune to temptation. And for Solomon, his weakness came in the form of political alliances and personal desires. To secure his kingdom's borders and foster trade, Solomon began marrying foreign princesses. A lot of them. We're not talking about a handful of diplomatic marriages. The scriptures tell us he had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines. 1,000 women in his royal household. Imagine the logistics. But the real problem wasn't the sheer number. It was who these women were. They came from nations that worshipped different gods: Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. These were the very peoples the Israelites were commanded not to intermarry with, precisely because of the spiritual danger they posed. Each wife brought her own culture, her own traditions, and her own gods to Jerusalem. And Solomon, the man who built the great temple to the one God, began to accommodate them. At first, it might have seemed like a harmless act of love or political savvy. He built shrines and high places for his foreign wives to worship their deities. On the hills surrounding Jerusalem, altars were erected to gods like Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and Molech, the horrific god of the Ammonites, associated with child sacrifice. The wisest king in the world was now actively facilitating the worship of idols right outside the holy city. The text is clear. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. Think about that for a moment. The man who had a direct conversation with God, who was gifted divine wisdom, was now bowing down to stone and wood. He had broken the very first and most important commandment: "You shall have no other gods before me." This is the great contradiction of Solomon's life. How could a man so wise make such a foolish choice? Was it political pressure? Was he so infatuated with his wives that he lost his way? Or was it something deeper? Perhaps a creeping arrogance, a belief that he was so wise and powerful that he was above the rules that applied to everyone else. He had the wisdom, but he failed to apply it to himself. He knew the difference between right and wrong for others, but in his own life, the lines became blurred. The consequences were catastrophic. According to the biblical narrative, God became angry with Solomon for his unfaithfulness. The divine favor that had defined his reign was withdrawn. God told him, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." The seeds of civil war were sown. The golden age of peace began to crumble. Adversaries rose up against Solomon, like Hadad, the Edomite, and Rezon of Damascus, who had long held grudges against Israel. Internally, a man named Jeroboam, one of Solomon's own officials, was told by a prophet that he would rule over 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel, the United Kingdom. Solomon's greatest inheritance from his father David was destined to be fractured because of his actions. He spent the first half of his reign building a magnificent kingdom and temple for God. He spent the second half building temples for foreign gods and watching his own kingdom begin to unravel. This is the tragic arc of his story. He started at the pinnacle of human achievement and ended in a state of spiritual and political decay. Some traditions and later texts try to make sense of this spectacular fall from grace. The book of Ecclesiastes, traditionally attributed to Solomon, paints a picture of a man at the end of his life, looking back with cynicism and regret. The famous refrain, "Vanity of vanities. All is vanity," sounds like the words of someone who has had everything the world can offer with power, pleasure, wisdom, found it all to be meaningless and empty without a proper relationship with God. He writes, "I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind." This isn't the voice of the triumphant young king. It's the lament of an old man who lost his way. Legends from outside the Bible, like those in Islamic and Jewish folklore, take the story even further, suggesting a period where Solomon literally lost his mind and his kingdom. One popular tale says that he was tricked by a demon named Asmodeus. This demon supposedly stole Solomon's magic ring, the source of his power over spirits and animals, and threw it into the sea. The demon then took Solomon's form and sat on his throne, ruling wickedly, while the real Solomon was cast out, forced to wander as a penniless beggar. For years, according to these legends, Solomon wandered from town to town, telling people, "I am Solomon," only to be mocked and dismissed as a madman. Can you imagine the torment? The wisest man on earth, unable to convince anyone of his true identity, living a life of utter destitution. This part of the story, while not in the Bible, serves as a powerful metaphor for his spiritual decline. He had lost his throne, his connection to God, and was left wandering in a spiritual wilderness. The legend ends with him eventually finding the ring inside a fish he was given to eat, allowing him to reclaim his throne and banish the demon. But the experience had humbled him forever. Whether you take these stories literally or as allegories, they all point to the same powerful truth. Wisdom without humility is a dangerous thing. Solomon's story is a timeless cautionary tale. It warns us that no amount of intelligence, wealth, or power can protect us from our own poor choices, especially when pride and desire cloud our judgment. He had all the knowledge in the world, but he lacked the wisdom to govern his own heart. So, the next time you think of King Solomon, remember both sides of the coin. Yes, remember the brilliant judge, the master builder, the philosopher king, but also remember the man who, in his old age, was led astray, the king who built altars to foreign gods, the ruler whose actions led to the division of his own kingdom. His life is not just a story of wisdom granted, but also of wisdom squandered. It's a powerful and, frankly, a little terrifying reminder that the greatest battles we fight are often within ourselves. The wisest man in the world teaches us, through his own tragic failure, that the ultimate wisdom is to remain humble and faithful, no matter what temptations the world throws our way. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the complex legacy of King Solomon. It's a story with lessons that are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was Solomon a tragic hero or a fool who threw it all away? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious.